Russia's action in Syria suggests a decisiveness and commitment that's eluded the West for 4 years. No wonder some Western strategists have talked about Putin envy, and those who've been at the centre of British policy must acknowledge the scale of this change.
I think it's hugely important. I think it's clearly part of a much wider issue to do with Russian ambition at the moment. But for the first time in the Syrian civil war, despite a lot of activity from Gulf states, from the Western powers in the bombing campaign, one major power has declared its support for a side and is really putting its money where its mouth is.
Do you think this has come about as a result of a vacuum of US or Western power?
I fear it has. I'm sympathetic to the dilemma policymakers have been put in by trying to, inverted commas, choose between the ghastly Assad regime or the ghastly Islamic State. But at a certain stage, you've got to identify strategically who is going to give you your best chance of producing some stability there. And state overthrow has just produced vacuums in that part of the world, the Middle East and North Africa, into which, given nobody else is prepared to step, the worst aspects of these multiple civil wars in the Middle East and the Islamic world have stepped up and are prepared to be violent about it.
Does that mean we should be on Assad's side?
Well, if you don't intervene on a major way against a regime like Assad or a regime like Saddam, and it took 150,000 coalition troops to overthrow that, the Saddam regime, they are not going to go quietly. And there was a lot of wishful thinking. I think by policymakers. I think there was quite a lot of the Arab Spring, we're all going to be on the side of history, nothing could be worse than these dictators. And what we found for a lot of people are things, for many people, are worse than some of these dictators. It's a Hobbesian world there in Libya and Syria and Iraq. It's absolutely ghastly.
Since the summer of 2014, an American-led coalition has been helping Iraq, trying to win back ground lost to Islamic State militants. Britain's contribution, a few dozen trainers for Kurdish units, has been small and avoided any frontline role. Little wonder, says General Mail, that its impact hasn't exactly changed the course of the conflict.
If we had taken the decision early on that we were not simply going to train the Iraqi security forces and the Kurds, but we were going to accompany them into battle, we would have found that the leverage we would have achieved in terms of capability on the battlefield would be massively higher. We'd have given them confidence, we'd have given them competence, we'd have given them credibility, and I think we'd have been able to see off some of the Iranian influence that came with the popular mobilization.
And you argued for those things?
I've argued for those, and I'm been utterly consistent about it. I argued it during my time in Baghdad, the six or so months I was the Deputy Commanding General. I came back and argued for it in Basra, and I argued for it in the National Security Council.
Over the situation with ISIS in the past year.
And I just said, I think if we really think, that our rhetoric about turning this back, this washback that's coming from Syria now, that's been compounded by the sectarian policies of Nouri al-Maliki, if we genuinely want to stop this and reverse it, we are going to have to do more than have high-flown rhetoric, because this is a really seriously dangerous situation on the ground, which if we allow it to become entrenched, will be very difficult to get out. And our response, frankly, is inadequate for the scale of the problem we've got.
Iraq and Syria are not the only cockpit of war in the Middle East now. Britain's longtime ally, Saudi Arabia, is also leading a coalition of Gulf states operating in Yemen. With allegations of indiscriminate bombing, how can continued arms sales to Saudi Arabia be justified?
Not only are we confronted with an extremist Sunni ideology manifesting in Islamic State, but we are still confronted, despite the nuclear deal with Iran, with a lot of Iranian regional ambition, which goes back centuries, and Iranian interference in Yemen, which is what provoked the Houthi move on Sana'a and President Hadi having to leave, Iranian interference in Bahrain, Iranian interference, clearly more than interference, influence in Baghdad with the Hezbollah, with the Assad regime. So some of this has to be seen in the context of a reaction to Iranian interference. Now, we'd all love Iran back on side, behaving like a normal state. But at the moment, sometimes we are too quick, I think, to criticize Gulf allies who feel very, very insecure. I think the more we contribute to their feeling of security, the more chance we have to influence them on a whole range of issues. Sitting back and simply criticizing them when they feel threatened by Shiism, by terrorism, by Iranian ambition, by Russian ambition perhaps, I don't think is a sensible way for us to go.
Thank you.